How long can a nation allow violations of its airspace before it has to bite back? This is the question Poland has been forced to answer in recent weeks, especially after Russia sent drones into its territory. Poland didn't take much time to come up with an answer. It's sick and tired of Russia and what it sees as Putin's obvious desire to expand Russia's borders deeper into Europe. Poland won't be threatened. Instead, it sent a warning to Russia. Poland will shoot down Russian jets that violate its territory. The Kremlin is furious. Some of Russia's most prominent figures are already threatening war. Poland's threat came during the September 22nd meeting of the UN Security Council. That meeting was only called in the first place after multiple cases of Russia violating NATO members' airspace with its drones and fighter jets. Those in attendance were there to figure out what to do about this new level of aggression being demonstrated by Russia. Attendees also witnessed Poland's Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski take to the stage, where he delivered words directed specifically to Russia. Sikorski said he had only one request to the Russian government before he launched into the warning that has shaken the Kremlin. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. Sikorski wrapped up his comments with the final chilling statement of, "You have been warned," which is as clear a signal as Putin could ever hope to hear about what Poland's intentions are from here on out. Poland has had enough of Russia. It's tired of the constant threats, and it won't tolerate Russia launching what amounts to attacks on its territory, even if those attacks consist of a handful of drones. If Russia escalates beyond those drones and starts using fighter jets to intimidate Poland, Sikorski says that Poland will go beyond intimidation. It will shoot the Russian assets down. Anybody who may be doubting the seriousness of Poland's intentions here, perhaps believing Sikorski to have gone rogue with his warning, is mistaken. It's not just Poland's foreign minister who is telling Russia that its jets will be met with missiles and anti-air fire. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has also said that his country won't hesitate to destroy any Russian military assets that find their way into Polish territory. Euronews reports that Tusk echoed his defense minister's comments on September 22nd, showing that there is a complete unity behind the scenes in Poland. "We will take the decision to shoot down flying objects when they violate our territory and fly over Poland. There is absolutely no discussion about that," Tusk declared. Again, this is a clear message. If Putin hoped that Russia would be able to play on divisions either within Poland or between Poland and its NATO allies, he's just found out that isn't the case. Poland is going to destroy any NATO assets that enter its airspace. Russia's leader has been poking and prodding at NATO throughout September to see what sort of response he would get to his constant airspace violations. Now he has that response. And it's not just Poland that's making the threat. On September 23rd, Bloomberg reported that the leaders and ministers of several European countries have also told Russia that they're ready to shoot down airspace-violating jets. Not all of those nations are quite as forthright as Poland. They're not making the same grand public declarations. However, they're demonstrating that many in the European Union or EU and NATO both stand behind Poland's decision and are willing to do the same thing to combat Russia's growing aggression. Bloomberg provides the details, stating that envoys from France, Germany and the UK had a tense meeting with Russian representatives in Moscow. There they addressed their concerns over a recent incident in which Russia sent a trio of MiG-31s into Estonia's airspace, with those fighter jets only leaving after NATO scrambled its own aircraft to escort them away from Estonia. According to Bloomberg's anonymous source, the European envoys concluded that sending the MiG-31s to Estonia was a deliberate tactic ordered by Russian commanders, despite Russia claiming that their jets never entered NATO airspace in the first place. Bloomberg's sources also shared some interesting insight into the meeting. They say that Russia, though it has denied the incursion publicly, seems to have agreed that it happened and that it was deliberate behind closed doors. During the talks, a Russian diplomat told the Europeans that the incursions were a response to Ukrainian attacks on Crimea, the officials said. The Kremlin said those operations would not have been possible without NATO support, and as a result, Russia considers that it is already engaged in a confrontation involving European nations, Bloomberg reports. Already engaged in a confrontation. If that's the case, more fuel is being added to the fire of Poland's claim that it will start shooting Russian jets out of the skies. If Russia feels that the two nations are already at war, then surely a military response to military action is justified. Reportedly, the European ambassadors to Moscow told Russia's representatives that the incursions had to stop. They also noted that Russia's people took extensive notes, suggesting that they were under orders to deliver a detailed readout of the meeting to somebody. We all know who that somebody is, Mr. Putin. Finally, on September 25th, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that he'd been coordinating with Poland, France and the UK, and that Germany will support all measures necessary. Neither the UK nor France have delivered comments. But it seems likely that they don't have to. They appear to be on the same page as Germany, which is on the same page as Poland when it comes to what to do with Russian jets that violate NATO airspace. All of this would be bad enough for Russia. It's poked the NATO bear one too many times, and it now knows that it runs a major risk of losing some of its fighter jets, along with the pilots of those jets, if it violates NATO airspace at all. Still, Putin might have hoped that the defrosting of the relationship between Russia and the US during 2025 might offer Russia some respite. European nations might be calling for Russia's jets to be shot down, but perhaps US President Donald Trump will provide a more moderate take, Putin may have hoped. Russia's leader was wrong. Trump has also thrown his support behind Europe's NATO members taking out any and all Russian aerial assets that stray into their territory. Trump didn't use many words to express this support, but his message couldn't be any clearer. As The Independent reports, Trump was asked whether he supported calls for NATO allies to shoot down Russian jets if they violate their airspace again. Trump only needed 3 words to tell Putin everything that he needed to know about where the US stands on this particular issue. Yes, I do. What at first appears to be a Polish threat is quickly spreading across Europe. With Trump's support for Poland's suggested countermeasure, NATO will feel confident that it can deliver action to back up its words. Putin's gambit has failed. His attempts to test NATO's resolve have led Russia down the path of potentially losing jets, weapons, and pilots that collectively cost millions of dollars. And it's all because Putin tried to intimidate a collective defense alliance that is increasingly waking up to the real threat that Russia poses. Does all of this mean we'll soon see missiles and bullets flying into the sky of Poland? The answer is no, at least for now. Poland's threat has placed both NATO and Russia into a state of limbo, and we'll only discover how serious Poland's warning is if Russia dares to violate the country's airspace again. Russia may stick to drones with Poland for now, as it can afford to lose plenty of these cost-effective weapons. We'll only get real answers if Russia decides to test Poland with fighter jets. As we await to see what happens, more conversations between NATO allies are taking place. We mentioned earlier that Russia violated Estonia's airspace with 3 fighter jets earlier in September. That violation caused Estonia to invoke Article 4 of the NATO Charter, which compels all member nations to take part in a consultation. Poland took the same course of action following Russia's drone incursion into its territory. That consultation took place on September 23rd, AP News reports. And just as we've seen so many times already, it looks like NATO stands behind Poland and any other of its members that choose to shoot down Russia's violating jets. Russia should be in no doubt. NATO and allies will employ, in accordance with international law, all necessary military and non-military tools to defend ourselves and deter all threats from all directions, read a NATO statement in the wake of the consultation. The mention of military tools should concern Russia. That appears to be NATO speak for, our members will destroy Russian jets that enter their airspace. Of course, it's likely that more conversations within NATO need to be had in terms of the mechanics of carrying out this threat, as well as what the organization's rules of engagement will be. Is it enough for a Russian jet to simply violate NATO airspace? Will NATO only engage if that jet fails to heed warnings from the affected nation? Just how far does Russia have to push before it's met with fire? All of these questions need to be answered. But if Sikorsky and Tusk are to be believed, it won't take much more than a simple incursion for Poland to open fire on Russia's jets. So how has Russia responded to all of these warnings and the official NATO statement? How do you expect? The Kremlin is threatening war as it attempts to throw the Russian military's might around, even though all of this only started because Russia was attempting to intimidate NATO's members in the first place. Several of Russia's most prominent ministers and propagandists have all come out to express variations of the same message. If Poland or any other NATO nation shoots down a Russian jet, they say, then Russia will consider it an act of war. And that appears to be the case whether Russia's jets are violating NATO airspace or not. Of course, Kremlin mouthpiece Dmitry Peskov was among the first to claim that Russia would respond to its violating jets being taken out with warfare. Putin's press secretary claimed that Russia and NATO were already essentially at war just days after Poland confirmed that it had shot down Russian drones in its territory. On September 15th, the Kyiv Independent reported Peskov as saying, NATO is at war with Russia. This is obvious and needs no proof. NATO provides direct and indirect support to the Kyiv regime. This appears to be Russia's flimsy justification for what it's doing with its jets right now. NATO providing aid to Ukraine means that NATO is at war with Russia. Presumably, that also means that North Korea is at war with Ukraine and NATO then. After all, North Korea has confirmed that it sent soldiers to Russia to support Putin in his efforts to retake Kursk after Ukraine's counter-invasion into the Russian oblast. In July, CNN reported that North Korea is planning to send as many as 30,000 of its troops to strengthen Russia's forces. Peskov's dramatic statements are to be believed. Much of the world is already embroiled in a conflict. While Peskov's comments were a general proclamation about the state of Russian and NATO affairs, Other Russian commentators have honed in on Poland's claim that it's going to start shooting down Russia's fighter jets. Bloomberg says that Russian Ambassador Alexei Meshkov is among them. On September 25th, Meshkov spoke to French radio station RTL, where he said, "If NATO shoots down a Russian plane under the pretext of an alleged violation of its airspace, this will be war." Notice the use of the word alleged. Given Russia's propensity for denying all accusations that it's violated another country's airspace, even after being confronted with all the evidence that it had, every incursion would be alleged. Poland could take out a Russian jet over Warsaw, and Russia would still deny it ever sent the jet, and if Meshkov is correct, will declare war. And of course, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has had his say. His message is much the same as that delivered by Peskov and Meshkov. On September 25th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Lavrov claims that NATO and the EU have declared war on Russia. He reportedly made the comments during a meeting between the foreign ministers who represent the group of 20 nations. Again, the same old lines about those organizations having declared war on Russia the moment they started offering support to Ukraine are being trotted out. All of this shows us where the collective Russian mindset is right now. To Russia, repeated violations of NATO airspace are simply an extension of the war that the country already believes itself to be fighting. However, there is a little hint of cowardice here. If Russia truly thinks that it's at war with NATO and the EU, then why aren't its jets doing anything more than entering NATO airspace? The 3 MiG-31s Russia sent to Estonia stayed for 12 minutes before flying away when NATO jets arrived. There are contradictions here. Russia is claiming that it's at war, but it isn't fighting. Perhaps Russia is instead waiting for a NATO nation, such as Poland, to make what it could class as the first move in a conflict before becoming more aggressive. Shooting down Russian jets would constitute that first move, giving Russia's propagandists all the ammunition they need to sell the war to the country's people while hiding the reasons why those jets were shot down in the first place. This is speculative. But what isn't speculative is that Russia is showing no small amount of hypocrisy in its threats of war. That's demonstrated by Meshkov, as the Kyiv Post offers more of the comments the ambassador made when speaking on French radio. "Quite a few planes violate our airspace. Whether accidentally or not, no one shoots them down," Meshkov claimed. Is that really the case? Sort of. As the Kyiv Post points out, Russia technically hasn't shot down any aircraft that have violated its airspace, assuming those violations have happened in the first place. However, it does have a history of being involved in shooting down planes, and often those planes are commercial rather than military. Take Malaysian Airlines flight MH17, for example. In July, the European Court of Human Rights found Russia and Russian-backed separatists guilty of shooting down that airliner back in 2014. All 298 people on board died in the incident. However, Meshkov is technically correct when he states that Russia didn't shoot down the plane for violating Russia's airspace. Instead, it shot flight MH17 down over Ukraine during the year that Putin launched his initial campaign against the country he has since invaded. The pedantic among you could even make the argument that, based on Russia's own claims, shooting down flight MH17 did not mean it shot down a plane over its own airspace. After all, one of Putin's main reasons for starting the Ukraine war is that he believes Ukraine has always been part of Russia. He made that claim in a rambling essay entitled "On the Historical Unity of Russians and Ukrainians." Putin called Russians and Ukrainians one people in that essay, reinforcing several times that this is what he truly believes. If that's the case, Russia has shot down an aircraft over its own airspace. After all, Russia believes that it owns Ukraine. Technicalities and potential hypocrisy aside, Russia also hasn't had to face NATO jets flying over the Russian mainland. Meshkov may claim that it has, but he doesn't provide any evidence of this happening. Can we really believe that Russia would guide NATO aircraft away from its airspace if they ever did violate it? Or would Russia do what Poland is saying it's going to do from now on, shoot those jets down? Let's assume that Russia is serious for a moment. Poland shoots a Russian jet down over its airspace, and Russia declares war. What would happen from there? When it comes to pure numbers, Russia should have a military that's strong enough to defeat Poland if Poland is fighting alone. That's according to Global Firepower, which ranks 145 military nations annually based on dozens of factors. In the numbers game, Russia has the advantage across the board. Its population is more than 3 times the size of Poland, contributing to Russia having an active military of 1.32 million personnel versus 202,100 active service members for Poland. Russia spends more than twice what Poland spends on its military annually. It also has over 3,800 more aircraft, over 5,000 more tanks, and 131,527 armored vehicles, versus Poland's 23,138. In a naval battle, Russia's fleet contains 419 ships, Poland has 62 vessels. However, the Ukraine war has taught us one thing: Russia's superior numbers don't guarantee a victory. Spirit, the desire to defend your country, and innovating in the face of Russia's attempts to overwhelm are all just as important. Poland certainly isn't lacking in the spirit department. As a nation that has felt the full weight of Soviet aggression in the past, Poland isn't going to go down easily if Russia does declare war. Sikorski made that clear in April when he delivered what Newsweek calls a grim prediction of what would happen if Russia and Poland ever went to war. Russia has attacked Poland many times in the 500 years of our history, Sikorski said. But in this scenario, Russia will lose because we, the West, are far more powerful than Russia. Ukraine is not fighting alone. In contrast to what happened in the past, we won't be fighting alone. And that's the key point. Poland doesn't need to be strong enough to defeat Russia on its own because it's part of NATO. And as NATO appears to have made clear in its statement following the consultation triggered under Article 4, it's going to support any of its members using whatever means they have at their disposal to deal with Russia and its airspace-violating aircraft. That implies that everything up to and including those members shooting jets down isn't going to be considered an act of aggression against Russia that could lead to a NATO member being forced to fight alone. It will be an act of defense. If Russia responded to that defense by starting a war against Poland, or any other NATO member that shoots down Russian jets over its own airspace, Article 5 would be triggered. That article means that all NATO nations are duty-bound to come to the direct aid of any other member that is a victim of aggression. So Russia won't just be fighting Poland if it starts the war it's threatening to start, it will be fighting all of NATO. Russia knows this, which raises the interesting question of what it would really do if one of its jets were shot down over Polish airspace. Perhaps we have the answer, thanks to what happened in 2015 when Turkey shot down a Russian Su-24M that crossed the border from Syria into Turkey. Russia made a lot of threats back then too, but ultimately it didn't follow through because Turkey is a NATO member. Instead, Russia settled for an apology from Turkey. Would it do the same again? Would an apology even be forthcoming in 2025 when it's clear that Russia is trying to push NATO's buttons? Nobody will know the answers to these questions unless Russia decides to see for itself whether Sikorski, Tusk, and NATO as a whole are serious about their warnings. And it's not like Russia doesn't have a history of attacking NATO jets, if not with direct attacks, then with hybrid warfare. Kaliningrad has tried to cripple the Spanish defense minister's jet. Find out what happened next in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the latest developments in the Russian airspace violation story. And thank you for watching.